Hello, everybody. Welcome to this UEA event where you'll be meeting the creative technologists who've worked so hard over the past 12 months to deliver Future and Form. I'm Tim Wright, as you saw from the name below, and I'm the executive producer of Future and Form. It might be worth me explaining what Future and Form is. I hope many of you know that already. Future and Form explores possible new futures for literature in the digital age. 6 writers and a diverse group of UEA academics have been working for the last 12 months with creative digital technologists and cultural partners across the East Anglian region to produce innovative and interactive literary experiments. Our cultural partners include National Centre for Writing, Norfolk and Norwich Festival, the Forum Trust, Norwich Millennium Library with Norfolk County Library and Information Service, Norwich Theatre Royal, Norfolk Wildlife Trust, Norfolk Museum Service with Norwich Castle Museum, Ormiston Academies Trust, British Archive for Contemporary Writing, and the Sainsbury Centre. So we have a lot of stakeholders in this project. For information on Future and Form, please go to futureandform.net. One of the key aims of Future and Form has been to provide prototypes for possible literary futures. And I'm delighted to be able to present to you people from Guildhall Live Events and Mutiny, the 2 digital production partners, here they are, who worked on the front line in extraordinary circumstances to deliver these prototypes. So the format of this evening is that we'll dedicate time to each of the 6 projects in order. They'll be described to you and we'll discuss some key features of each one. And then we're hoping that we can spend at least 10 minutes at the end, hopefully, answering some of your questions. So please do send those in as we go, as they occur to you. And I'll endeavour to pose as many to our panel as I can get through in the time. I just want to say one last thing before I present the panel to you is I think it's fair to say that without the people you're about to hear from tonight, Future and Form would probably have faltered and perhaps failed under the pressure of the working in the pandemic. So to produce these works took a lot of innovation just in workflow, in terms of workflow, and perhaps we may hear about that as well as the technology and the tools. But I want to thank them all personally for working so hard under difficult circumstances. And we're here to celebrate the delivery of 6 intriguing and challenging works and to discuss some of the tools, technologies and production methods employed within the works. So I'd like to introduce you to Guildhall Live Events. So if we, I can't see the others, the rest of the, hello, here they are. Hello. So we have Dan Shorten, the creative director. Give us a wave, Dan. Dan is an award-winning director and designer with over 20 years experience. Alongside a significant touring theatre and dance background, he has designed several large-scale outdoor artworks, including installations at the Barbican and the Tower of London and at festivals such as Glastonbury. Dan has a master's in digital performance. Clare Partington, hello Clare, is a production manager. Has over 25 years experience in production across both theatre and music industries, including WOMAD, Glyndebourne Youth Opera, Miranda Hart, That's What I Call a Live Show, London 2012 Olympics and the Queen's Jubilee Concert. She is the current tour manager for Right Said Fred. Originally trained in stage management at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, she's also held lecturer posts at Guildhall School. And Richard Moores, hello Richard, is the technical supervisor. Richard is a creative technologist with a background in sound and video for live performance and installation. He has contributed to many shows at the National Theatre and the Barbican and has toured internationally with a number of high-profile artists such as the Michael Clark Company and Room 29. Richard has a master's in computational arts. And then we have Mutiny, our second digital production partners. So we say hello to them. Hello, there is Simon. I see Simon. I only see Simon at the moment. So Simon Poulter is an artist and curator with a national profile in devising new work with creative technology. He has worked as a commissioned artist and curator with, amongst others, Watershed, Fact, Furtherfield and Whitechapel Art Gallery. Simon founded Collusion in Cambridge in 2014, culminating in a major exhibition of 6 new digital commissions in May 2019. Simon co-developed the Reveal project in Kings Lynn and was previously associate curator for Metal, working in Southend, Liverpool and Peterborough, notably delivering Net Park, the world's first digital art park Is that true? The world's first. I'm always suspicious when people say the world's first.
Yeah,
he's nodding.
definitely. Yeah.
All right. And then we have Sophie. Hello, Sophie. Sophie Mellor. Sophie Mellor is an artist and creative technologist. She has a working practice developing new socially engaged work across the UK. She was a founding director of Plan 9, an artist-led space in Bristol, and is currently a founding director of, now should have asked you this, is this CAMP or CAMP? Sophie.
Very camp, yes.
Very Camp. Currently a founding director of Very Camp, an artist professional development network in Devon and Cornwall. She has led a number of online workshops teaching a range of skills. So she knows about AR, VR, A-Frame, Premiere Pro, and audio software. So she's going to be able to clue us in on a lot of the stuff that's going on in some of these works. No pressure. And finally, and last but not least, Marcus. Hello, Marcus Roma. Marcus is gamely taking part of this, sitting in a car outside the venue of Provenance, which is one of the works that Mutiny has delivered that's currently being performed at Dragon Hall. It's on till Sunday, and if you haven't been to see it, you really ought to go. It's I've been once. I'm going back on Sunday. It's fantastic. Marcus Roma is a nationally acclaimed theatre director and has worked as an artistic director for a range of organisations. He has broad experience of developing new writing talent and considerable experience as a producer of outdoor digital projects that blend live theatre and digital. Marcus wrote and directed The Knife That Killed Me, the feature film for Universal Pictures. He has additional experience developing digital strategies for arts organisations, including Theatre Royal Stratford East, Chichester Festival Theatre and Manchester Royal Exchange. So I hope that gives you a sense of the calibre of the people you're talking to here, who've got just so much experience across a range of projects and campaigns, and working with all kinds of different artists. I think the collaborative spirit is something that's going to come across here quite heavily, I hope, because actually trying to coordinate with writers, UEA academics, venue partners, and various other stakeholders as we go forward, as you know, and then to coordinate that with the practitioners who they've been working with across design, 3D design, 2D design, sound design. I keep trying to tot up how many people have actually worked across this project, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I think we got over 400 names of people who've worked on this project over the last year. So without further ado, I think we should just crack on with talking about the projects themselves, the work themselves. So the first project we're going to talk about is Senseless. And Senseless is James McDermott is the writer, and it's his new multimodal play. And it's a timely exploration of love, longing, and the challenges of communicating how we really feel. Fusing traditional stagecraft and live theatre with unprecedented use of state-of-the-art immersive filmmaking and extended reality techniques, we watch two people try to establish a loving, real relationship in a world where all communication and contact is slowly shutting down. So, can we see the trailer for this one, please?
Play about a couple who meet in a fictional lockdown in 5 years' time, where the world is plagued by a digital virus that if you catch it, your system will shut down, your body will shut down, you'll lose your senses and your ability to express yourself creatively. And it's how a couple navigate an early relationship when one of them catches that virus. What I've learned about the process is tech has to be integral to the plot. So within the play, tech has enabled characters to meet, fall in love, date. I've become aware of how words can spoil plays, really. I think so much of tech can do the storytelling. Embracing that idea that 90% of our communication is non-verbal, I think there'll be a lot more silent scenes where lots of the communication is happening on apps. The gesture of human beings gathering together in space and time in a room and turning off technology won't change at all in 50 years. And I think theatre might be one of the few places left in the world where we do turn off phones, turn off the internet and sit together as human beings.
So first up is going to be the team from Guildhall Live Events, who are going to talk you through what Senseless is and how they approach that work. Over to you guys.
The three separate kind of workflows of creative
production and technical. So we'll talk about it in turn between the three of us. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the creative. And really, Senseless started with conversations around with James around what his ideas were, really about sort of communication and how technology can be used in modern life to both help and hinder the way that we talk to each other as human beings, the way that we communicate on social platforms, and the effect that that has on our use of language and our behaviour in general. And we were trying to think about parallels between the way that we use those technologies in our lives, the benefits and pitfalls of those things, and how we can incorporate that into the stage design, where it can enhance that staged presentation, and where it's going to hinder it, and where the technology is a problem, where we allow for that to happen purposefully, where the kind of live and tech bump into each other, and where we need to sort of think more carefully about solving that problem. During the rehearsal, it was a bit more of a sort of traditional theatrical process, really. But we were making lots of revisions to the detail of particularly the AR front plates that we used, and thinking about how much of that kind of unseen subtext should be visible to the audience. And then in the final stages, where we were actually putting it together in a workshop format, I think really the main challenge was trying to stay aware of the fact that there's a screen audience and an auditorium audience, and where the technology is going to be helpful and where it's going to be problematic. So, Claire, over to you.
Okay, so from a production point of view, this was a play then with a completely unique end, that the digital side of it was going to lead, and that the video creative was going to be as important to us as the actors. We had live actors, we had to have doubles, we had loads of live actors in case we lost some, and then this incorporated with the digital design was going to inform our narrative. 30 people in the team, including a lighting designer and a sound designer. We went through all the traditional processes. So we had a rehearsal process, we had a fit up, but then that fit up was then extended in order to workshop the NCAM system. So digital got all the time in the fit up, an extra 4 days in order to calibrate and manage that process, so they were ready to go. A lot of the lighting work was managed through pre-visualization, through capture on the EOS system. Because we had to work remotely, pre-visualization became really important, and because obviously so much of what we were looking at was being created 3D digitally, then we could use the capture system to really get a good idea of what the lighting states were done. So virtually all the lighting was designed in capture system and then brought out, programmed into the space at the end, which was really good. And in terms of kind of design and production, it was a triple threat really, because you had to design what you were designing for the studio space, for the live audience. It had to be suitable for broadcast, and we did put it up onto Twitch and popped it out onto our own eStream. So we did some little tests, and we managed to broadcast live from the space, which was quite satisfying, though no one knew. And then that all had to be integrated into the digital workflow and into the creative, the digital. So basically, our world was made by the video creatives, and we all had to live in it. To it.
Over to Richard.
Okay, yeah. Just to kind of continue what Claire's been saying, we were creating a kind of XR environment, a sort of XR studio, but one which would function in a similar way to a theatre stage as well. So we had this kind of dual aspect going on, this sort of hybrid arrangement. The technology we were using was the same as you would use in a pure XR stage. So we had a kind of media server in as the kind of like hub of everything. We had a camera tracking system which was sending positional data back to the media server, and the media server was passing that positional data on to game engines, basically, that were generating all the content live. And then we sort of layered that up in the media server to create these other kind of elements as we went along. So we kind of like launched into a kind of what was effectively a tech rehearsal and a dress rehearsal, and the finished product all at the same time. So it was a fairly intense experience from the
How many days? How many days were you in the studio for doing that?
I think total was 10. I think.
Right.
13.
But that 13, right? Yeah. But that was, I mean, that was from that was from a bare studio, like nothing in it, no screen, anything. So we went from sort of like an empty room to the set in about 2.5, 3 days, and then we started kind of connecting the system and then working with the camera tracking and programming as we went along. So yeah, it was swift work, really, I think.
I wonder whether we want to bring in Mutiny here as well, because this is an opportunity for a bit of cross dialogue. If we could have all 6 people on the screen, that would probably be good, to see if they've got some reaction to what they've been told about that project and what occurs to them about got any questions about the technology. I suppose my first question about it would be, what's the experience for a person in the theatre space, an audience member in the theatre space? Dan, I wonder whether you had some, because that was the one bit we obviously couldn't bring much audience into that space because of COVID restrictions. But how did you imagine that would happen?
So the screen that is being sort of composed by the motion tracked camera that contains the backplate projection, the live actors, and the front plate projection is present in the auditorium as well. So if you were an audience member watching the show, you'd be able to see the live actors on stage, and then you'd be able to see a composite screen of the sort of special effects being added in real time at the same time. And I think, that kind of tension was something that was very interesting to me throughout the project. We're asking the question, does technology have a positive effect on the way that we communicate and receive and transmit information between each other? This is integral to the play. So by shoving that into a live performance as well, and asking that question directly to the audience, like, can you take this in at the same time? Is it interesting? Is it distracting? It was an important part of the overall picture, which is why the way we've presented the work on YouTube is that you've got the live camera feed and the composite feed as well, so you can kind of see both things at the same time.
I don't know if that spoke to any of the Mutiny team as to some of the issues that they're interested in around the sort of audience being confronted with these technologies. There's Marcus, but yeah, please come in. We can't hear you.
Sorry. It reminds me of some of the, again, by Robert Lepage, where you see the roots and the branches of the tree. So you see the technology, and you understand the plumbing, so you can see that, as well as being able to see what's happening and what effect that's having on stage. So I found that really interesting to watch how those two worlds live together.
Excellent. Yeah. And also, I think it's maybe my other question is maybe again around production for Clare and Richard, is to just do around using these new sort of gaming engines and technologies and how they fit in. I mean, obviously there's a very different workflow for the programmers and the camera operators and the people thinking about the game engine in the virtual world, to those people who are delivering the live theatre experience of the actors and the lighting. So are there some basic tensions there about workflow, or was it easy to try and get them to be in sync?
Shall I answer that? I mean, I think in a way, we really just dipped our toes into this water in a lot of ways, as in a kind of exploratory sort of way. It sort of switched to kind of like 3D workflows has kind of happened in the world of, like, even in theatre and anything that was using media servers. So in a way, it's quite a natural progression to then use game engines, because they're really optimized for this sort of thing. The tricky thing is that they're almost like introducing a different skill set in a way. It's not really my background. It's not really the kind of background you get if you like come from a video, sort of live video kind of like world. It's sort of this mashing together of game design and live performance, which is sort of happening all the time now, I think. I think that's just going to continue.
Well, I think that's a good theme. That's a good theme. I'm going to cut you off there, Claire, because I want to get on to the next project, because I can see the time ticking away. It's such a shame we've only got an hour, because there's so many interesting things in each project. I do urge everyone to go and check out the website because of that and find out. There are some really great making of videos of Senseless that are up on our YouTube channel that GLE made for us, that drill down to these different aspects of production. So if you go on to the Future Informed YouTube channel, you'll see them there. And tomorrow there's a watch along of the whole show at 8 o'clock tomorrow on the YouTube channel. It's free to come. You just need to book at the Norfolk and Norwich Festival website. You can find details there, or you can link through from futureinformed.net. But I want to move on to shifting lines and get Mutiny to talk about this, because actually it plays in rather interestingly about that idea of people coming together with different skill groups and matching up their skills, as it were. Now, shifting lines is the shifting nature of the North Norfolk coast is evoked through the subtle choreography of voice, natural sounds, video, photography, and sensor data in this new multimedia poetry collection by Mona ARSHI. Inspired by and recorded at the stunning scenery of Clare Wildlife Reserve, ARSHI draws on the ancient Arabic poetry form of ghazal, combined with cutting-edge audio techniques from sound artist Peter CUSACK and beautiful imagery from Norfolk-based photographer Matthew Usher to conjure this vibrant and elemental landscape. And we have a short film to watch about that.
Guzzle, Clay, gentled in the blue-black broth, vanishing circles of Clay. A returning song, migration song, living in the mouth of Clay. Surrender here, your eyes, ears, scratch out a song, a double-tongued sub-song carried in the eggs of Clay. The young crouch, the reeds draw out the moths, shadow paint shadow in the silence of Clay. Birds wired to breath, unveil, draw a line, a thread, swift things, vanishings, I, the returning song of Clay.
So I'd like to get Mutiny to explain to you what the work is. I think that is the most important thing to understand, and then to understand also about this amazing collaboration with people from different backgrounds and different skill sets. So who wants to describe it for us? Simon's going to have
I'm going to lead on
Excellent.
this one. Yeah.
Excellent.
So maybe you could leave the other pictures on. Actually, that's quite nice like that. All of our projects were really about our idea of devising. So we work with the writers, we work with the other people, and it's an open channel. That's really integral to Mutiny's work. So we do cross the line creatively, and we did so with the Mona ARSHI project and the other two that Marcus and Sophie are going to speak about. Mona was incredibly easy to work with. She wanted to be involved in playing with the technology. I would say that our work is art first and technology second, and this comes out of a kind of idea of innovation for us often lies in the creative practice, and then the technology comes in behind that. So when you see the installation at Clare, effectively what we have is an installation which is a Trojan horse, because actually the people who are watching it are twitchers, people attending a wildlife centre. They're not people from an art crowd. So in effect, what we have is a computer with Resiloom, which is VJing software, and using an NDI plugin, we're able to actually stream a live camera from one of the hides into the show. So people sit down and they can see the poetry, and then they can actually see the live aspects of it, and then that streams back out. So for us, that was quite exciting, this idea of transmitting a location. And indeed, the work is about collapsing the gap, which is what digital technology is so good at doing. Mona was amazing in the way that she worked with Peter CUSACK. We agreed that we wanted to leave the rough edges in the work. So you may have heard a jet going over during the poem. If you're in that coast, it can be beautiful. Then all of a sudden, RAF jets will fly over at about 200 meters above your head. Peter CUSACK is well known for his project Sounds from Dangerous Places, so we chose him because we knew he would be great to work with. The overall project, as we've said, was, I would say, of the three we worked on, was the easiest. Mona brought a lot of trust to the equation. I suggested to her that we use ASMR techniques for doing the recording. We did sessions remotely where we worked together with Sandy Nutgens in his studio in London, and she was very receptive to being produced and directed, and I think that's a hallmark of the other projects we worked on. So all three of the writers actually allowed us to cross over the authorial line. So in a piece that we've written actually for the Future Informed website, what we've talked about is that fact that we didn't regard ourselves as technical partners. We regarded ourselves as being co-creators of the works, and I think that's quite evident when you see them. In many ways, what we're trying to do with our projects is disguise the technology. We don't want to foreground it as the thing in itself. We, by necessity, took a very open agenda with this because we didn't know if these works were going to be shown because of the pandemic. So we had a very open curve and attitude to how we made them. They could have been websites or they could have been real-time artworks. One of the things that I've written about today is that we imagine that one of the future forms of new writing will be understanding the temporal, spatial and extended nature of experience, which is rather similar to the other project that Guildhall have just shown us, and in fact James McDermott talked about that, this idea of being placed in all time and being temporarily and spatially shifted. So I think there are some synergies with what Guildhall have done. We are a very small company. We don't have the resource of a university. So our work very much relies on an extended associate network of people. And we've realized that we probably are an art collective because we've been described as that. We're quite relatively senior people, actually, as I think you commented. But one of the things we're working with in terms of our projects is the idea of diversity, and it was pretty amazing. The writers that we got to work with kind of created this amazing diverse framing, and that enabled us to bring in a very broad range of people to work with. But I think Mona was delighted with the project. The response, even from Twitchers going into an experimental artwork, has been really great. The venue is really happy with the work, and what we've realised, again, a bit like what Richard said, we've built something which is kind of like the first stage, really, because I'll remind everybody that we were doing R&D, but our projects became front-facing works in a festival, so we felt under pressure by that. But what Richard said is, the same. This work is the first base. We'd love to do this live bird sanctuary in another venue with Mona doing the poetry. That would be great fun. So that's what we have to say on this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know if I want to bring in Guildhall as well, if they've got any observations about it. But I think one of the things I wanted to ask you, maybe stress, is that no two experiences of this installation are the same. Is that correct?
Yeah,
So
that's
that
right. Yeah.
what you're getting is what's actually happening when that, in terms of how the Mona's poetry and the environmental sounds in the video are getting mixed. How's that actually working?
Well, it uses, as I said, it uses Resiloom, and the latest
Yeah.
version of that, you can actually do much greater randomization, which is great fun, actually. So it means that when we created the work, we used a modular approach. So the sound segments are 1.5 minutes, the video sections are 1.5 minutes, and then we can actually lay that out in the channels, and we can actually provide, I mean, it's essentially a VJ set, which is random, and it plays itself in a loop, but it's a bird sanctuary with poetry. So it's sort of, as we've said, it's sort of a way of hacking a technology into a completely different location.
Any questions from anyone else about it? Or any sense of it for now? No, I think, well, I must urge you to go, and you can see it online. You can try it online, but it doesn't quite replace the experience of being out there. It's actually, I'm up in the area at the moment, and it's not raining. So it's actually quite nice. But my experience of it, just for is that it's such a strange feeling to hear poetry, the voice of the poet. So sort of slow down, decay, rise, whisper, speak, but in the same vein as the reeds are making different noises and the birds are making different noises. So actually, when I walk to the venue from my house, sonically, it's the same thing as you get, and then you go into the installation, but it's the same thing, but with poetry. And so it's just interesting to see how the voice and the words and the writing of the writer have become sort of enmeshed in another part of the environment, of the disappearing environment, actually, up here. So it's a fascinating work. Thanks very much for describing it. So we'll move on. I think what you're all going to realise by the time we get to the end is the enormous variety of the work here, that's being on display, and also the different kinds of technologies that are being brought on, sometimes by people who know them well, and sometimes by people who are learning them for the first, engaging with them quite early on, and just playing with them to see what they can do. So it's really interesting. So the next project is The Living Book, which is an immersive experience that invites us to explore the long-term consequences of climate change in a virtual world as imagined by children today. Inspired by children's author Mitch Johnson and created in collaboration with students from 2 Norfolk schools, this 360 VR Imaginarium spans cities and deserts, mountains and beaches, forests and factories, bringing to life the effects that global warming could have on these environments and on our everyday lives. And I think we've got a trailer for this one as well.
The Living Book focuses on climate change, and I've written a provocation piece that's been sent out to schools across Norfolk, and then children at those schools have written various creative pieces. So that might be letters to the future, or diary entries, or newspaper articles, or short stories. And these are being used to create an immersive 360 virtual video with an accompanying soundscape. Within this Imaginarium, users can change the temperature of different locations on an island and see the effects of climate change 50 years in the future. So many people now are used to using different forms of technology to consume stories. I think anything that has the potential to democratize writing and creativity is a really good thing.
So back to Guildhall live events for this one, to talk through a very different sort of production involving, well, it seems to me I had not come across this kind of browser-based VR engine before, so it was pretty mind-blowing to get my head around what was going on with this one. But once I did and got a headset on, if you do have a Oculus headset or a Rift and put this on, it's well worth the experience, not least because of the fantastic music as well, which I imagine you might talk about as well. So please tell us.
Okay, so for this one, really we took sort of inspiration from the examples and the provocation that Mitch provided at the start of the process, and sort of sinking our own heads into the subject matter, thinking about what our own thoughts and opinions around this topic were, taking the work that was produced in the schools and the workshops, and then sort of analysing and discussing what the school children had produced, building visual palettes that felt tonally in tune with that writing that had come out of the workshop, and using all of that workshop content to generate a library of different visual assets. Two-dimensional drawings, wanted to have this sort of two-dimensional friendly kind of feel to it, and then building a series of landscapes that can contain those assets, assembling those into 360-degree environments, and then finally, as Tim sort of just mentioned, bringing the sound into that, both music and sound design and some of the spoken word as well, to really add the sort of the texture and the detail into those worlds. Over to you, Claire.
Well, yeah, the session orchestra, as you mentioned, Tim, another big team. So about 35 people on the production team for this, including our session orchestra, which I have to plug again. But in a way, this was probably the most kind of literary and the most book-like, because of the processes actually were very 2D. So we started off with written submissions from the children in the Norfolk schools, and those were then made into 2D artworks by our design realization students and some freelance illustrators. So we brought the ideas off the page and made them 2D. Then they were animated by the video design for live performance students. And once those have been animated and brought into the worlds, then we sort of turned it over to the website development team, because obviously we had a workflow on the video content creation side, which started off in Unreal and then kind of worked through several other iterations before we got the final product there. But then we're also working with Isaac Clark of the Black Shook Co-op and Giovanni Rossi, who is one of our alumni, to develop the back end of this, because there was an awful lot to be done to create it, and eventually it became something you can do on a desktop, something you can do in VR, and a 360 video. So there was a lot of different things that this work had to do, and it had to work in all of these different platforms, and the functionality of it became sort of quite crucial, obviously crucial in as well as making it look and sound beautiful. And then we had some interdisciplinary help from the electronic and recording music department and a professor of gaming, Marius, who spatially sound mixed for us. They use Unreal as well, so we had to then think about how to make the sound into sound, so it is in 3D. And then we had to mix in the children's voiceovers and that big orchestra. And that was that. Over to Richard.
Yeah, this was a funny one from the technical point of view, really, because it's really unknown territory to some extent for us in terms of how to deliver this stuff. And what we found was that it was a bit of a moving target as far as we found we were thinking about designing for kind of fixed installation sort of scenario, and for something that was remotely accessible at the same time. And there was a real tension. There was the fact that venues were closing and opening, and there was the uncertainty around audiences was really, with this one, I felt was really fed into the technical decisions we were trying to make. So we'd gone down one road with Unreal, and we started with Unreal, and Unreal was sort of, there was some kind of synergies with James's piece. We thought, maybe we can hit, both with the same approach. And actually, halfway through, we would kind of realize we couldn't. So we had to do a very quick kind of reassessment of how we were going to do the delivery, and settled on using WebXR engines. We used Babylon in the end. But almost arbitrarily. There are several, and we just kind of picked one. A very quick kind of like, does it do roughly what we think it ought to do, and then went for it. And so we, in the end, kind of like translated the whole thing out of Unreal and into a web engine. So I have to say hats off to Isaac Clarke for basically just jumping in and learning Babylon on the fly, having never seen it before. So it's JavaScript, but it's running on top of this fairly new and fairly difficult to predict kind of like framework, which is sort of finding its way into browsers right now, but which is sort of a little bit inconsistent. So I'm not saying inconsistent in a kind of flaky way, just that you get different results depending on the browser and the platform. So, I mean, part of the questions we had to kind of like tackle in the development was that should we just make a web app? Should we just make a mobile app or a downloadable app? Or rely on browsers. And I think that this is a real kind of like issue at the minute of like how you do this kind of thing. And the jury's out really. We kind of, I think, did a successful kind of like job on a browser, but it didn't really necessarily solve all the problems we thought it would in terms of like cross-platform compatibility. You still run into issues. So maybe in another world this would have been on the Play Store or something on the App Store, but then in a way, then you open another can of worms. So it was a really interesting process. We learned an awful lot.
I think that plays very well into the next project of Eleanor. If you want to bring Mutiny onto the screen, because we're going to talk about Eleanor, which is a mobile AR project, and I think you've probably got some views about open sort of web XR and browser-based VR AR in what you're going to speak about. Is that right?
That's true. Well, in a minute, when I talk about Eleanor, I'm going to teach you how to make the web app that we made in 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes, you're on. Okay, so using a combination of augmented reality software and audio, accessible via a specially devised web application on your web. No, it's not an app on your phone. Sorry, it's on your specially devised website that is accessible from your phone. Imogen Hermes-Gower's interactive walk blurs the lines between modern and medieval Norwich, fact and fiction, faith and science, in pursuit of the real Eleanor Talbot. So we can see the trailer film for that, please.
We are at the foot of Norwich Castle on Castle Meadow. Use the map to follow the route along the red line. Click on red pins for the story and blue pins for augmented reality. The augmented reality is discoverable at the points on the map. Cross the road carefully at the pedestrian crossing and then walk down the slope of Arcade Street. In front of the Royal Arcade, turn right onto Castle Street and proceed.
Somewhere here, not far from you, a river is flowing underground. It wasn't always hidden. 500 years ago, the great Cocky curled in view of the castle and guided the steps of the people of Norwich.
Great. Well, I think so. Sophie has taken on the challenge of how to do this in 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank Sam said earlier we like to put the art before the techne, but right now I'm going to put the techne first, because one of the most exciting things that I found about working on Eleanor is we used open source software throughout, and it's the idea that anyone could make this app anywhere and it wouldn't cost you any money. So, Eleanor is a sound and geolocated augmented reality web app. Their story is written by Imogen Hermes Gower. It's all open source software. So we used Bootstrap, ARJS, Leaflet.js, and A-Frame. So first of all, we chose to make it a web app because it's easy to update. You can keep updating it right until the last minute before you launch it. You don't have to upload it to iTunes or Google Play, so you don't have to go through all the various barriers that presents to developers. There's also less barriers to the user, so it's just purely in your browser. You don't have to go to the App Store to download it. It doesn't cost any money. So we built the web app using Bootstrap, which is an open source code base designed to build responsive mobile sites. Then the map that we used for the walk is Leaflet.js, again, open source JavaScript library for mobile friendly interactive maps. I'm just reading their strapline there. Then alongside that, we used a Leaflet plugin called Leaflet Locate Control, which enabled users to geolocate themselves on the map. Then we used ARJS, which is Augmented Reality JavaScript, which is an open source augmented reality code base, which you can use in your browser. It was created by Jerome Etienne, and it's currently managed by Niccolo Carpignoli, who we also work with on Eleanor, which flagged up some of the international nature of the three projects. So Niccolo is in Italy as we work with him. And we used geolocated AR. So ARJS, you can use it as a marker-based code or a geolocated code. And then we also used A-Frame, which is a framework for web-based AR and VR, and that's been developed by Mozilla. So this is all technology that you can Google away and find and then have a go yourself. So ARJS is kind of strapline, is you can do augmented reality on the web in terms of code. And that is pretty much all you need, really. So that's all the technical bits. And actually, what I was going to do, because I am really keen that people can actually go out and just do this themselves. But if you're doing it from scratch, it does involve a lot of Googling and random wandering around Stackflow and GitHub. So I'm just going to put in the chat, which is I spent hours and hours and hours wading through GitHub, a load of links to the various open source stuff that we use. So there it is. You can all go off now and make yourself a sound and geolocated augmented reality web app. So that's like the technical side, but the user experience is also really important, and that's very central to how we worked on. And then, and of course, central to that is the story, is the art, and how that story was then structured in order to create a user experience looking around medieval Norwich. And another thing we found really important was that Imogen narrated the story herself, so you get that real connection with the audience to the writer. So again, thinking about the user experience and how do you bring the voice of the author in more to the writing. And then the interface, so again, is really important in user experience. So you've got to be able to use it. It can't be really complex. It can't be, again, the technology has to be seamless. You can't be thinking about what you're using. You just want to have the experience. So we worked very hard to try and make the interface really clear and easy to use. It's very important that people knew where they were. It's a very basic thing. You're on a walk around Norwich, you might not live there. So how are you going to find where you're going? So there's multiple ways of navigating the route. So the pins that you tapped on to hear the story, you would have seen those pins in the video. They were numbered, very obvious. The route was put on with a line, very obvious. And then people could also geolocate themselves by tapping on a little icon, and so you get the flashing blue dot. We then had to think about, well, how do you navigate back and forth between the audio experience and the AR experience, because they were separate. So again, we had to think about how the interface would actually work on your phone, and how do you then easily get back and forth between the audio experience and the AR. So that had to be really simple again, else you just lose people immediately. So hopefully that was simple. And then the overall experience obviously is very important. So a lot of that was to do with the sound. I think sound's really important in virtual and AR experiences. One of the things I really liked about Guildhall's project that they were doing about was the commissioned music by the Guildhall Orchestra. So for Eleanor, we commissioned early music specialist Jean-Pierre Rascal to compose some original music. We also had Sandy Nutchins, who was doing the soundscape. So we had sound from medieval Norwich mixed in with kind of serendipitous sounds that you would hear, like bells ringing, had the sound of the river that you can no longer see. So it was really important to have this soundscape alongside the voice of the author and of the actors. And again, thinking about user experience, people, really have to be knowing what they're doing when they're doing this experience. So we added in the instructional voice, giving people clues on where to go and how to do the AR experiences. And that was really important part of the overall design of the walk. And then the last thing I'll say about this, it involved a lot of testing. Geolocated for AR is quite jumpy. It was quite interesting thing to achieve lots of testing within a pandemic. Obviously, the only way you can truly test geolocated AR is to go to the location. So that was quite interesting. We did on the street, on the fly coding in rainy Norwich. It was an interesting experience, quite frustrating at times. So a lot of testing, a lot of thinking about the user experience, thinking about how to make it clear, the user interface, and also just the open source nature of it and the fact that anybody could make this.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I want to move on because we've got two more projects to go, and I see the clock ticking here. But I'd like to, as a good segue to the next project, which is Where Do Stories Come From, about that issue, which that we're talking about experimental works that are quite sort of using sort of leading, if not bleeding edge technology, and yet we're still trying to make it accessible to the general public, who themselves may have issues around digital literacy anyway. So that whole tension between R&D, experimental R&D, and audience-facing work that Simon mentioned at the beginning is a big issue in this kind of work. But even more so is just the accessibility of that people, as you say, anybody can do this. I'm not sure they can, but yet. But the idea that there are open tools out there that you could give it a go is brilliant. And I think the same is true of the next project, about that Tash Orr was very interested in accessibility in terms of being a writer. Is that I think still a lot of people in the general public think it's a mysterious art for a few people. And I think he was very keen to try and think about a process by which a wider audience of people could be led from the journey from, as he says, you are invited to make the shift from reader to writer, from observer to active participant, as you inhabit the world of the writer as they craft the story. Using a unique combination of archived material from award-winning Malaysian-born novelist Tash Orr, computer-generated imaging, and responsive machine learning, you will travel 6,000 miles away to where the story begins, in Hong Kong. So let's hear that trailer, please.
It's very important for me to try and communicate to as many people as possible who come from my kind of backgrounds that actually literature is not a rarefied thing that is only reserved for a small number of incredibly well-educated, incredibly cultivated people. Actually, anyone can do it. So my project is going to be looking at ways in which we can break down these boundaries and have the participant put themselves in my position and to chart my course through becoming a writer. I think that we are going to find more and more ways of disseminating writing through technology. The intersection between technology and writing is such that we will find ways to reach wider and wider audiences. It's always been the aim of literature to capture the way we live and disseminate that.
Welcome back. So this is the final project from Guildhall Live Events. So it'd be great to have them on screen. Hello, there they are, still here. Brilliant. So please tell us about where these stories come from.
Okay, so I thought this was a really, really enjoyable project. Thought that Tash was an absolute pleasure to work with. I think he and I sort of clicked creatively quite early on. There's some really nice, detailed, subtle conversations with Tash about his sort of ambitions for the project. His ideas were always really clear, but he was also very open to how we might want to experiment with those ideas visually and sonically. It gave us a lot of freedom, really, to sort of show him how technology might be able to take his own ideas further, because he was a little unsure as to what exactly the potential of technology might be. So we spent some time thinking about his process. Him wanting to kind of bring people into his process and their own processes. So we spent a lot of time thinking about his process and things like sort of contemplation, immersion into a sort of sense of place through memory, and prompting that with things like photographs from his travels and from his life in general, and how that immersive way of thinking can help to evolve character and story and those kind of things. And therefore, we sort of, began to think about how the sort of technological process is sort of similar to memory in some ways, in as much as it produces something, but it's not the actual thing. It's not the real thing. It's always just interpretations, simulacrum, and that kind of led on to experiments with AI and machine learning to kind of further examine that parallel. Really, that the creative process is limited in as much as it can only ever represent something. So how this sort of false, imagined, algorithmic interpretation, in this case of what ended up being not Hong Kong, so it is, but it isn't the thing that it's trying to be. It just seemed like a really appropriate set of tools, and fascinating as well, of what the potential of this kind of thing might have in the future. The sort of experiments around atmosphere and location, memory and fiction, and how that all sits against reality. And then the last part of the creative process was, I suppose, establishing the tools and the platform for how users might engage with some of those things. I'll hand over to Claire.
Yeah, thank you. I think a bit like Sophie was saying, this one was the most writer-led because we kept Tash's voice in it, not only in his spoken words, actually, which he recorded on a phone in France, but we're probably the only person that's ever had tooltips written by a Whitbread award-winning writer. But his voice and his fingerprints are literally all over this. He wanted to work with a much, much smaller team. So we had obviously Dan Creative, Tash himself, and then the web development team with Richard and Sam, our sound designer. So it was quite a small, intimate project in that way. But behind what you see at the front, the back end is huge. Obviously, you've got the desktop and the mobile version, then you've got the database, and then you've got the admin interface, and then you have the gallery. So the actual development, which was Aaron Dorr with Richard, the website development, took most of the energy in terms of the functionality became the crucial part of that, and that was because the user experience was so important. This was probably the most intimate, as it was a one-on-one event. It's just you sat there with either your phone or your or your desktop, and it's not got the sort of grandiose theatricality or the collectiveness of the other events. This is literally just you and your mind and your device. So I think, you know, a lot of scenario planning, a lot of thinking hard about how the public would react, and what people would do with this, I think made a lot of work that you don't really see. But if we'd got it wrong, you'd know we hadn't done it. But yeah, big kind of push on the functionality and then using technologies to create lots of different types of scenarios in one space. And you can all contribute and write a postcard. Rich.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this was in a way when there was a similar kind of like arc of development to this one, because we began from this premise of creating quite an immersive, of wanting to create an immersive kind of an immersive, like almost cave-like experience that you'd be able to visit and kind of like go into. And as the sort of like pandemic progressed, we realized that really the only thing we could guarantee was some kind of like like kind of like internet version of that. We almost designed it inside out, and as we went further and further into the project, we realized that some of the premises we started with, like, and some of the accessibility premises we started with, which had been based around this like desire to not exclude anybody because they had the wrong phone or didn't have access to a reasonably fast internet connection. We had to kind of like completely turn that on its head in a way and think about how we developed it, how we developed the experience for exactly those devices that we sort of tried to avoid designing for in the original conception. So we started from like a 3D cave that you would go and visit, and ended up trying to optimize it for iPhone, and that is really the wrong way around. And we should have started with the iPhone version and gone in completely the opposite direction and built up from there. So that was a really interesting journey as far as we're concerned. The kind of the guts of this was all created really by Aaron Dorr and Isaac, who worked on the Living Book project. Like between them, I think they came up with perhaps at least 3 websites, and arguably 4 or 5, because we found that trying to get these like rich media experiences to work on phones isn't just a matter of having the same website on the phone. It really is, in fact, a different version. It's a different design. So we got into, like, similar to the way Mutiny were describing the Eleanor project. A great deal of this was about usability and the sort of like the affordance of the experience and leading people through it, because it's quite a difficult thing to grasp, just what you need to do. So it was a really complex process. This is probably, it's the most complex of the 3 in a lot of ways. I know the XR one's complex, but we didn't have to develop the software to do that. And this really was this was quite challenging. And it has, as I was saying, it has this whole other aspect of it where you're delivered an email of some of the artwork and what you wrote, which then goes onto a gallery. So there's a lot of moving parts. And yeah, I think, I can only say, like, hats off to Aaron, who more or less coded this from scratch in JavaScript using a few libraries, Gatsby in particular. He just, it's a dynamic web page. It's a single dynamic web page over and over again.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So another talented individual out of dozens and dozens that worked across Future and Form. I'm happy to say that we've managed on the website to put the credits of everybody up there on the individual pages. So if there's a particular aspect of this you're interested in, you can look up on the page and find out about the person who delivered that aspect. It's well worth a look, actually, because it just shows you that, again, just brings home the range of skills and experience of people across the board. in these projects. So let's move. I see the time is ticking on, so I would thanks for that. And we just the last project is Provenance that Marcus is going to talk about. It's a vivid and emotional multi-screen immersive installation created in collaboration with author Ayobami Adebayo and creative technologist Mutiny. It tells the compelling story of twins separated by death. We follow the journey of the sacred Ibeji artifact from its creation in Benin City, Nigeria in 1895 to present-day Norwich in a story that spans continents, cultures, and lifetimes. Roll VT.
We speak to you from the three worlds in which you have lived. We speak to you of the three phases of your never-ending life.
We speak of the living, the dead, and the unborn.
They were discharged from hospital this evening. I've just finished speaking to their mother.
Idu, you are the Esu who came after us.
Your mother's what? My mother also had twins years before she gave birth to me. Chide never told me about any twins in your family. My earliest drawings were of the twins. I sketched scenes based on the stories my mother often told about them.
Ibeji, one soul split in halves that inhabit two bodies. When one body leaves the world of the living, the distance between the two halves becomes unbearable.
And we're back, and hopefully we're live from Norwich of Marcus in a car outside Dragon Hall, and he's going to talk us through Provenance, which, as we said, is a performance piece that's happening right now in Dragon Hall till Sunday, but is also will be available online in the next few days. So take it away, Marcus.
Thank you. We wanted to really make an emotional connection with an audience, because the way that Ayobami told her the story is that when she was at UEA, she was at the Sainsbury's Centre and she saw this Ibeji artifact, and the way that it connected with her to want to tell the story about what the journey that artifact would have made to get to that point. So we wanted to make something in our Mutiny style, which actually combines both recorded media, drawing and animation, live performance, and the 3D object. So we want to do this in physical space. So we knew we were going to make a physical piece that was going to perform 26 times. So we commissioned everything from 3D objects right the way through to shooting the film at Riverside. We were originally going to go and shoot it in Lagos, but obviously our plans changed, and we had to shoot it in COVID secure ways with every single actor shot separately. And we now present this over 360 screens at Dragon Hall here in Norwich. All of those actors are then placed together, and Sophie did a fantastic job, not only with the storyboard, but also with the editing. And we were able to engage 14 freelance artists to help us make this project. So that's 6 actors involved. So for us, the ability to create something which had a multiplicity of layers. So in the physical space, we create a timeline which actually is 120 years from the story of the start of that Ibeji right the way to present day Norwich. And we do that physically in the space where we place the actor who engages with the audience, and the audience then find out halfway through the process that there's a relationship between the person who's been talking to them and welcoming them in and showing to their seat. She's actually related, and the object in the case is her great uncle. So what we do is we have a real electric physical presence that integrates the story from the narrative on the 3 screens right the way through to the person in the room, that actually takes the audience with them on that journey to physically engage with that piece. And then we raise the questions around, okay, so what next? So what we wanted to do was to reflect the work that we created with Ayobami by developing that script and working collaboratively with her to tell that story, which not only connected a story from 120 years ago, but brought it bang up to right into the room now. That was an opportunity for us to develop that piece of work. So it's film, it's animation. We also worked with an illustrator, also from Lagos. Ayobami was in Lagos. And all this was mediated on Zoom throughout the 8-month period as the script and the development of the project proceeded. And we have a result of the performance now, which we say is running for 26 performances for live audiences.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a stretch to be working across centuries and across continents at the same time. How do you coordinate that work, Marcus?
Well, we, like everybody, we've been working through the media. So one of the things for us is that where the innovation has come for this is not only the ability for us to work globally with the artists, but also to develop that piece of work and to make it happen and to deliver it. Because again, our shift of our deliverables moved round around December like everybody else, but we still had to make a way. How do we tell that story, and how do we work together to enable that story to be communicated in the way that the writer has intended? And so again, that collective and collaborative and devising approach, which is what's really important for us at Mutiny.
Great, thank you, Mark. So perhaps we could. So that's a rapid race, even though we've sort of overrun a little bit. And thank you for hanging on with us. But the rapid race through six of the projects. If we could get all of us back up on the screen, it would be good just to have a sort of a bit of a wrap up, but also just a discussion about maybe some questions that are coming in. There is one question that has come in. Has working on the project from the creative technical side changed your view of writers? So who wants to grab that one? Yeah, so Simon's right in there. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I'm sure that would be true for all of us. I mean, the thing is that quite a few of these people they write novels, and, you know, they do this kind of, novel writing is a very solitary thing. Whereas working with creative technology is all about extension and collaboration. So I think the writers had to kind of bend a bit more to our way of working than we did to theirs, I would say. Yeah.
Guildhall, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think for me, I would say it's been a really positive experience. So it's enhanced my opinion, I suppose. I don't know about changed. It's the three works were really different. The three writers were really different. You know, so I think that it's just sort of reinforced that it's interesting and beneficial to work with a very sort of varied group of people.
Yeah, very interesting point. And then I was going to just go round the room once as a wrap up to ask not just about the experience of writers, but because these are prototypes and experiments. You know, I think there was a funny meeting not that long ago where I think it was Clare. You said that we should be calling this not future informed, but now we know, as in terms of like the experiment that we've had experiments. And we've created prototypes, and now we sort of know with the prototype of where you might go with each of these works in some way. So I wanted to go around the house with you and ask you, is there one particular area of sort of technology or practice or a form that's come out of this that you sense might inform your own practice, or that you can see yourself taking forward in future work that you'll be doing? And I wonder if I could go around and pose that to all of you as to what the impact of the whole process has been on your own thinking about making and creativity and the kind of work you might want to make. It's a tricky question, I suppose, but I'll start. Why don't Sophie? Do you have some thoughts on that?
I think going back to the writers and just thinking how writing is constructed and how coding works. So mostly I didn't work on Mona's project, but I was blown away by her poetry, and I was really interested in the kind of similarity between how code has a very particular structure and poetry has a very particular structure. And I'm quite excited to think about that more, and how these two forms could meet more together, and then what would happen, you know, if the poetry got totally lost inside the machine, what then, and how would it change the machine? So that's I'm
Wow.
particularly excited about that.
There was some great sort of code poets hanging around the centre. What was it called? The Future of Writing at Nottingham Trent University in about 2000, early 2000s, where there was some experiments going on in that area that were just fascinating. So yes, that's interesting. Claire, I wondered if you had some thoughts about, in terms of production management, and you've alluded to the way you've had to deal with sort of very different kinds of workflow, but and adapt to certain things of that. But is there anything that's come out of that where you thought, oh yes, that's an interesting approach that I might do more of?
I don't want to be too flippant, but I'd absolutely love AI to write my risk assessments, method statements, production schedules. Self-generating paperwork was very tempting. But we started talking about that when we were doing the AI postcards on where does it come from. Just sort of push it to like, what if we got the AI to write like Tash? Or any writer, and that was sort of the start there. But I can see a more practical everyday.
Well, I think in terms of risk assessment, that's a really smart idea. I can see that really helping. Well, hopefully not. Given that there'll be more pandemics to come, I suppose it will be worth developing it, right?
Yeah.
and then,
could make me rich.
Marcus, Marcus, you got your hand in the air.
I think we can't not mention the fact that this work, we've all been working through this pandemic. And what's clear is that as we're coming through, and what we're learning from that, is that the way we have to approach collaboration, as well as looking for what our audiences want and need, we certainly can't go back and thinking of how we created stuff in the past. I think we've created a new landscape of opportunity where hybrid and blended working and the opportunity to really reach out and make a much more diverse teams come together and do shared collaborative projects. And for me, that's one of the biggest learning for me is that we've all had to work under very difficult circumstances, and so have our audiences. It's interesting when the audiences come into the space at the moment, everyone's wearing masks and we're sanitizing everything, but people are wanting to come back. It's how we then look after that and think about the future facing forward work for audiences, because ultimately we need to collaborate better together, all of us, as people working cross art form sectors, but bearing in mind how we create that work that shares and creates a much more mutual dialogue with our audiences.
Wow. Yes, thanks. Who hasn't spoken yet? Richard, what are you? You probably had enough of all these technologies, haven't you, for a little while?
Well, it was a lot at once. I think there's an awful lot of stuff which has come out of this, really, which I think is still kind of like percolating through. I mean, I'd really second what Mark said about collaboration, though. I mean, I think the year kind of the yearly, even without this, it would have been a challenge because we would have had to adapt the way we collaborate. But this really kind of like for me highlighted the kind of like the kind of like the ups and downsides of kind of like living online, really. And there's some tremendous things came out of this, and there was some tremendous collaboration. Like I had even though it was like kind of a lot to deliver in a short space of time, working with people I work with was amazing. But on the technical kind of like end of it, I think that there's just there are so many directions these projects could go in. Really, I feel like we just scratched the surface of them. Really, we did. The kind of it has been really interesting, as Sophie was saying, to kind of have this direct comparison between pages of websites and pages of novels. It really kind of opened my eyes to the structure of websites, which I'd never really thought about before. Like I've always sort of avoided web-based things for some reason. But I'm really and in the stuff that I do is always I always think in terms of installation, and it's been really interesting seeing the potential for like massive online collaborative stuff. I think that's really not an area that I've really thought about beyond kind of education, really. But I think the notion of kind of stuff coming in a shared way from people out there has just finally, the penny's just finally dropped with me after having been on the web for 30 years. also. But I feel like we've almost gone back to the way it was pre-Web 2 or whatever. You know, that point where everything became an e-commerce, kind of everything was monetized. I think, you know, working on things like these projects reminds me of that time pre-2000 or whenever it, you know, the cutoff point was, where there was some kind of sense of a worldwide community that you could kind of like connect to, and that's you know, pretty positive.
That's a very interesting point. And then Simon, have you got something that you're thinking? Well, have you got something you're thinking about from this that's come out of this that you're going to take forward?
Well, I do agree with what Marcus has said about this idea of collaborative approaches, that we won't give that away, that we worked with Ayabami in Lagos. We've never met her, and we've made her project. And we will look back on that and think, wow, that was incredible. There's no way we'd have done that before. But one thing this has reinforced for me is the idea that with creative technology, the best projects are where you devise the platform or the architecture before you build the thing and start to play with technology. So all three of our projects are about platforming, and we designed them before we knew what they would actually look like. And I think that is something that can be taught to other people, is that platforming is a way to go about producing a project where you have got lots of variables, and I'm going to carry on doing that. So that's not new to me, but that is something that I think is a really powerful way to go about building things.
Brilliant, thanks. And Dan, what about you?
Well, there's definitely elements of all three that will inform my future practice, without a doubt. I mean, these are obviously things that we were interested in beforehand and have been working towards, and this is just an extension of that. But yeah, certainly elements of all three. But if you were sort of force me to pick one thing that I'm really looking forward to the next kind of go at, would be the XR in theatre stuff. I think that there's, there was stuff going on in COVID that kind of halted a lot of sort of satisfying live performance. Obviously, we all just got locked in front of Netflix and things like that instead. Zoom readings are not quite the same thing. Whereas I feel that this sort of XR live performance blend has got some potential to do some really interesting things. And I really like the way that this project sort of took a kind of a brand new, but existing kind of platform and way of working that does exist already, just in a different industry. And we're getting advice from all sorts of directions. Don't try and do it the way you're trying to do it. That's not what it's for. But we kind of went, well, we're going to try and do it anyway and see what it can do in this context. And obviously it had some problems, but it had some advantages too. So I would say I'm really looking forward to getting an audience in a theatre with something on the stage that's trying to do sort of broadcast and live performance blend.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Please, thank you so much for spending your time today explaining those, what are 6 quite complicated projects, and also bringing out some very interesting themes, I think, for anybody who wants to sort of work in this interdisciplinary way. I think that there's quite a lot in what you've said that could be drawn out. So I just want to say thank you to everybody here, but also that what I take forward from this is the collaboration thing, but also the collaboration with people who just know so much stuff. And that I've learned a huge amount from other people about what they know, but B, also what they can pick up and then just do. As we've said, somebody can just suddenly decide, I'll take a look at that piece of software, and then suddenly I'll build something. The sheer sort of courage and talent of people to just pick up stuff and make and do and create is really exciting. And I'll always want to seek out projects where I work with people like that, and that's the audience as well. Let's not forget the audience bring that to the work as well. that they are ingenious and creative, and if you give them tools, they will make amazing stuff. So I think hats off to the audience as well. So I think it was Mitch Johnson, actually, one of the writers, said he was so blown away by the idea that his practice had been up to this point about him as one person delivering something to thousands of people. And then he was in a worker project where he felt that he was now in an environment where there were thousands of people making something just for him to enjoy in a headset. So the sort of 1 to a million, million to one thing has been turned on its head. And that's a very exciting prospect for all kinds of meaning making and creation in the future, I think. And you guys working across these pieces is just a small sort of mini example of that, to my mind. So look, thanks very much for spending the time talking about this. I really wanted to have this moment where we could see you together and celebrate the achievement of getting these works together over what has been a really difficult time. So, and thanks everyone who's been on and listening to this. This will be available on our YouTube site to review. If you still do have questions around any of these projects, you can, there's an email address on the site. I'm very easy to find as Moongolfer on most social media platforms. I'm very happy to take questions and find out answers to things. If there's something that you think tomorrow you think, oh, I should have asked about X, no problem. Just get in touch with us. It's no problem. So thanks, and have enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope to see more people in real life very soon. Bye.
Bye.